The Wars of the Roses, a 30-year dynastic struggle for the crown between the royal houses of Lancaster and York. That's the story everyone knows, or thinks they know, but just about every word of that first sentence is incorrect. The Wars of the Roses is a hugely complicated series of disputes. It's long periods of peace punctuated by brief but often bloody flashpoints of violence. Precisely what the Wars of the Roses was is hard to encapsulate in a punchy tagline because it changed over its course several times. Few things are ever as simple as they appear on the surface, and local feuds were played out on a national stage with propaganda so rampant and so effective that it can be hard to get to the truth. Perhaps we should begin by clearing up what we should call this conflict. The Wars of the Roses is the name that has stuck, though it wasn't coined in its final form until it appeared in Sir Walter Scott's novel Anne of Geierstein, published in 1829. The name is based on the premise that the House of Lancaster was represented by a red rose and the House of York by a white one. The white rose was a symbol that was used by the House of York in the 15th century, but the House of Lancaster never used a red rose. The appearance of red and white roses closely followed the Battle of Bosworth and the accession of Henry VII as the first Tudor king. Henry VIII was positioned as the embodiment of the union of the red and white roses, signifying the end of conflict between Lancaster and York. So roses were very soon used to talk about the period of the conflict. The Cousins' War is a later still creation, the earliest known reference at the moment appearing in the mid-20th century. The bottom line here is that those living through this series of crises probably didn't give it an overarching name. It was just life, just today. I call it the Wars of the Roses, but feel free to use another name if you wish. There's no right or wrong answers here. Part of the problem with studying the Wars of the Roses is the lack of clear, incontrovertible source material, which means understanding the events is always a subjective assessment. So this is my version of the Wars of the Roses. The first question that's impossible to answer is where to begin. To give the fullest picture, we probably need to briefly visit 1399 and the deposition of Richard II by his first cousin Henry Bolingbroke. Richard had become king aged 10, and his reign had proven a battle with his senior nobility that descended into tyranny in the 1390s. When his uncle John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, died with his son and heir Henry in exile, Richard tried to grab the valuable inheritance for himself. Henry returned to England to press his claim and found support from those disillusioned with Richard and unnerved by his tinkering with the laws of succession. If he deprived Gaunt's heir, who might be next? Richard was deposed on the 29th of September 1399 and replaced by Henry, who became King Henry IV, the first Lancastrian king, the dynasty taking its name from the primary title it held before taking the crown. This was the first time since 1154 that the crown had not passed from father to son, or at least from brother to brother. Edward II had been deposed, but in favour of his son and heir. Richard had no children, and his cousin Henry was not considered by many to be his heir presumptive. An heir presumptive is one who holds the position of heir, but who might be displaced. An heir apparent is one whose position cannot be taken by the better claim of another. So usually an heir apparent will be the reigning monarch's oldest son, and an heir presumptive will be the one most likely to follow the king if no son arrives to displace them.